Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the United States Declaration of Independence. This is findable all over the place, but I happen to be reading this out of the Norton Anthology of World Literature, where it's classed alongside a number of other revolutionary manifestos from the Age of Revolutions. So the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, passed by the Continental Congress, famously on July 4th, 1776, Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia. The Declaration of Independence is an Enlightenment-era document. It is built on the principles of liberalism, in the traditional sense of liberalism. Not in the sense that like in the US, for instance, today we talk about liberalism as the opposite of conservatism, like conservatism tending to believe in social hierarchies, tending to believe in order and tradition and things like this. Liberalism tending to believe in support for historically disempowered groups, etc., etc. Compassion, empathy, valued very highly, etc., etc. That's not the tradition we're talking about. We're also not talking about what many regressive conservatives try and reclaim as classical liberalism, which basically means those with the most social power can do whatever they want and everybody else can suck an egg. This is not actually the Enlightenment era tradition that people like Jefferson are working in. And I think the Declaration of Independence gives us a really good sense of that if we read it critically. So, starting from the beginning, one interesting thing. We have the heading, the Declaration of Independence, in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Now, that's an interesting heading, because actually, a large portion of the people living in the colonies did not support the revolutionary movement. As much as 30%, maybe even more, of people in the colonies were opposed to independence and were loyalists who continued to support the British Crown. That's not unanimous. Also, I think there were people who specifically left the Continental Congress because they could not, in good conscience, sign the Declaration of Independence. So, I mean, technically, that's a fine way of getting unanimous consent if everybody who disagrees simply leaves and you don't count them anymore. But that definition of unanimous also slightly strains credulity. But then we go on. The opening portion is really, really important as a statement of principles, a statement of values for Enlightenment-era liberalism. So it says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station of which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. Now, this is an important section here for a couple of reasons. One is this idea that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Jefferson was a slave owner. Many of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence were slave owners. Many who weren't slave owners supported the institution of slavery. They clearly did not actually endorse the idea that all human beings, or even all men, were created equal. Nonetheless, this was a revolutionary step forward in a society, a European society and a colonial society dominated by monarchy, dominated by aristocracy, in which inequality was written into the structure of society and government. The idea that human beings, or even men, or even white men, were all equal was a revolutionary step. And it's a wonderful assertion of principles, even though the United States has never successfully lived up to this principle. But the other thing here, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This is a key Enlightenment principle, the idea that government functions by the consent of the governed, that you need the permission of people in order to rule over them. And to institute, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that government long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Now, this is an important bit, because this is where, debatably, the American Revolution distinguishes itself from the French Revolution. One of the arguments about the French Revolution, and this is a basic but not entirely untrue argument, is that the French revolutionaries went full out for liberty, equality, individual freedom, etc., etc. The American model was more restrained, and in fact it was. It kept most of the social hierarchies and the inequalities that already existed within the colonies. Property owners who, under British rule, ran their local colonies, continued to run the states afterwards, so there are actually those who don't even consider the American Revolution a revolution as such. But this idea that revolutionary activity should be approached with restraint is significant. And actually, this is part of the reason why a lot of the people today who say, the US government is tyrannical, we need to overthrow it, are actually not really appreciating the spirit of the founding documents, because they do counsel restraint. I mean, there's a whole section here that says it's better, as long as you can endure something, to endure it than to destroy something that is functional, if not perfect. But when a little bit here where basically they're just like, the king is becoming despotic, he's doing a lot of crazy shit. And then it says, such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. So this is a really good example of deductive reasoning. And Enlightenment era thinkers, including Jefferson, were very, very good at logic. They were trained in logic, they were trained in rhetoric, etc., etc. What the argument here essentially does is it goes from a general principle. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. This is a broad political principle. This is the specific case. These colonies have been oppressed by the king, and we are therefore impelled to declare our independence. So this is deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is a structure of argument in which you go from broad principles to draw conclusions about specific cases. So this is what we've got going on. We then have a very, 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 very long section, the whole middle portion of the Declaration of Independence, which is just a list of specific grievances against the king. Some of these are phrased very vaguely. Some of these are incredibly problematic, like the last one. He, the king, has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So when he says domestic insurrections, what he means is slave revolts. And when he says merciless Indian savages, what he means is indigenous peoples. It's pretty rich that the colonists were like, hey, we're genociding indigenous peoples and sweeping from the face of the earth entire cultures, but they're the real bad guys, and the king is the real bad guy. Yeah. We've definitely got some problematic racial and ethnic elements to this. And that is, again, worth keeping in mind. Jefferson and the other members of the Continental Congress at this time were products of their time, and it was an incredibly racist time. It was also a very sexist time, etc., etc. These are problems that we should by no means gloss over, because they are shortcomings of that vision of equality. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, except Africans and African American slaves, except indigenous people, certainly except women. These are legitimate critiques. And we can take the ideals of the Declaration of Independence, and we can envision them applying to everyone. We can envision them not being restricted by the small-mindedness, the prejudices of the founding generation. And indeed, in the Black Panther Party platform of 1966, their last point, the last element of that platform is the opening portion of the Declaration of Independence. So clearly this has been something that has inspired liberatory movements going forward. Then we go through a last portion of the Declaration of Independence. They say, we've appealed to the king for redress, we've appealed to the British Parliament for redress, arguing in favor of our traditional rights as Englishmen. Those have all been ignored. So again, we've got not just here's a whole list of grievances, but we really tried to work with you guys, and you wouldn't work with us. So again, this is part of the justification for the separation. And then the final paragraph is a summing up. For all of these reasons, we are declaring our independence. And one of the things that strikes me is the last section, the last portion of a sentence here. But really the last portion of this, or the last sentence here. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. This is envisioned as a community, a political community in which not only do individuals have rights, they have responsibilities. That's, I think, incredibly important, because a lot of contemporary classical liberals, which again is a name that many regressive conservatives like to identify themselves with, because it doesn't sound as bad as calling themselves regressive conservatives, even though that's more accurate. This is the problem that many classical liberals today often ignore, is that being part of a political community means not just individual rights, not just you have personal liberty, but also that you have responsibilities to others. There are other people who are part of this community, and they have some claim on you.